First off, I want to say a huge thank you to every single one of you. We just recently hit 2,000 subscribers here on Yanumba Codes, and that might sound like a number, but to me, it represents a community of people who believe in learning, building, and growing together. And I think since we've reached this milestone, I thought it would be very appropriate and the very perfect time to take you back to where my journey began and share how you can get into web development in 2025. And here's the thing, here's a spoiler. It didn't start with me being prepared. It started with me saying yes when I had no idea what I was doing. But all, I think that's the first step that I would like to start you guys off of. So now I'll say this, right? Back when I was still doing graphic design, a friend asked if I could also build for them a website. And I could have easily said no because I wasn't a developer, I wasn't a web developer. But instead, I just went on and said yes, and I let them believe that I could pull it off. Whilst at that moment, I had no idea how to deliver. But here's the truth, if you wait until you feel ready, you will never start. And I, yes, it's true that I didn't know how to deliver, and that project became the spark that forced me to grow. The first step is to web development isn't about having everything figured out. It's more around the courage and the willingness to step into the unknown. The second step that there is when you're getting into web development in general is that you just need to learn just enough to solve one problem. So once I said yes, it really hit me that I had to figure out how to actually build and lay the foundation to a website. What I did was I started Googling, I started watching tutorials and pieced together answers to the specific problems that I was supposed to face when building this specific kind of website. And given that it was a blog website, it was going to be direct to the blog pages and all that, and developing one blog page was on WordPress was the main aim when it came to this project. So I figured out the builder process and every single thing, but I realized that that's not essentially what I wanted to do, because the blogging site I wanted to build was supposed to be dynamic. So what I did was I started picking up HTML and CSS and eventually JavaScript, and just a bit about, or just enough about, the hosting capabilities without having to use WordPress in these various situations. The lesson here is you don't get lost in the endless theory, and you just need to find a real world problem and just learn enough to solve it. Because here in 2025, with all the frameworks and tools out there, the AI that is out there, all the frameworks that are out here to be used and to be manipulated and to be exploited, this principle still holds true. Actually, it holds more true now than it did before. And practical learning beats passive learning every single time. The third step is to now start mastering the foundations and then build upward. Because here's the thing, after finishing this first website, I realized that I liked this work, okay? So I doubled down and started to focus on the fundamentals, the basics, the principles of how to build from the ground up. So how the web is structured, how HTML lays the skeleton, how CSS adds design, how JavaScript makes things come alive. Once I understood those things, I started branching into the frameworks like Laravel and tools like Bootstrap CSS, and even now in Tailwind that have already transitioned to in 2025, those same basic principles that I learned back in those times haven't gone out of style. AI can generate code, but without foundations, you wouldn't even know how to edit the code that AI has generated, and you'll always hit roadblocks. So the fundamentals generally will give you the confidence to adapt to anything new, really. That brings me now into the fourth step, which now begins to be a little bit more practical than the previous steps that I've mentioned, which is you need to throw yourself into real projects. So every project after the first one was always messy. I never finished some, if I can recall, but I always learned some new things when it came to various tools. So it was overwhelming at most times, and then you get sometimes underpaid. So you find yourself thinking that maybe it's not the right trajectory to go into. But every project also stretched me. So that's the reality. One client needed a login system. So I had to learn authentication. I also had to learn levels of authorization and also different things. Another one needed payments, integrations. So I had to dig deep into payment gateways, the Raja APIs, the Pesapal and all those different portals that require payment gateways. And at no point was I fully ready beforehand. There was no single point I was. But each project forced me to bring myself to a new level. Each project forced me to level up. And that's the secret. You don't need to be an expert before you start taking on work. You don't. Projects themselves are literally the best training ground, and they grow your skills a lot faster than any classroom would. If I was to start all over again in 2025, what would I do? So the answer to that is pretty simple. I would just go ahead and break it down to you in a way that is more understandable and more realistic. So if I had to start all over again today, I'd begin with one small project, maybe dive into something for myself or a friend, and I just learn enough HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to get it live. Then I would now start diving into a modern framework. So React if I wanted front end, or Laravel if I wanted to lean onto backend. I'd also focus on the design basics. And for most people who don't understand what design basics are, UI and UX are the most core principles when it comes to building an application for the people. Okay, so if you want to build real world projects and let other people use them, this is the most important. I definitely use AI. I'd use a lot more AI than I use right now, but as a partner and not a crutch. Because here's the thing, most people will get into AI and use it for vibe coding. But the reality is, even with vibe coding, you're bound to build something that has a lot of complexity or a lot of bugs. And the reality is you wouldn't have wanted those bugs or those, okay, no one wants bugs, but you wouldn't have wanted those advanced features in that application to begin with. But AI has crafted out a more complex situation for you. So you find that you using AI as a crutch, not as a partner. And now once those crutches fall off, once you're not able to pay for that AI tool anymore, you're stuck. AI can speed you up, but you still need to understand the code that, at the end of the day, you're going to be putting out into production. So if we're talking about the UI, UX, we're talking about the back end, we're talking about the front end, if we're talking about all these different things, that combination, the foundations, the real world projects, and smart use of tools, it's the fastest path right now in this point to web development growth right now. So to everybody who's with me celebrating 2,000 subscribers, ladies and gentlemen, here's my message. Don't wait for the perfect course, the perfect moment, or the perfect confidence. Take a leap, okay? Say yes to something that feels just out of reach and chase down that knowledge that you need to be able to make this particular situation real. And that's how I started. That's what's still growing me today. And yeah, so with that being said, thank you again for 2,000 subscribers. I really do appreciate you guys. This community means the world to me. And if I could take the first messy step and end up here, so can you. So with that being said, please do indeed take care. And as always, may God bless.